Welcome to my discussion of the breakdown of fatty acids. And the way that I will discuss it is first imagining that we have our fatty acid in where it originally is, then its quote unquote travel towards where it should be, and then the actual process of breaking it. Now, what I'm talking about is that our fatty acids originally reside in the cytoplasm. Okay, some of them are free fatty acids, and then maybe some of them are attached to CoA. That is, they are fatty acyl CoAs. And if we are to permit a free fatty acid to break down, then the first thing we should actually do is to bind with it a molecule of CoA. In order to do so, we actually need to expend one molecule of ATP. ATP becomes AMP, and we successfully attach CoA to the fatty acid, now becoming fatty acyl CoA. Do note that from this point on, I will just call fatty acyl CoA as acyl CoA because there's no other acid anyway that we will be covering here, and it saves time. Now, do note that there is something special in how we used ATP right here. Normally, and when I say normally, if you've watched my previous discussions like glycolysis, whenever we use ATP, it just becomes a DP or a diphosphate. But this is rather special because we instead have a monophosphate, and it's as if we used two phosphate groups here. So, before, when we have ATP becoming ADP, we think of that as minus 1 ATP. But since here we actually expended two phosphates, it's as if we assume that when we count later, it's actually equivalent to 2 ATP molecules lost. That is important, so take note of it. Now, regardless of the length of the fatty acid, it will freely be able to penetrate this thing right here, which would actually be my representation of the outer membrane of the mitochondrion. Do remember that in the structure of the mitochondrion, we have first the outer membrane, then this space right here, which we call as the intermembrane space, and then of course this dashed line right here would represent the inner membrane, and therefore everything else from the right of the IM is this what we call the matrix. So I'm trying to say here that our goal actually is first to deliver fatty acids to the matrix because the process of breakdown is actually done in the matrix. Now, if I have an acyl CoA in the intermembrane space, the shorter fatty acids actually have the capability to just, freely penetrate and just go to the matrix, no problem. So this would apply to probably lauric acid and then shorter than it, but to the longer ones, especially palmitic acid, which is one of the most common fatty acids in our cells, that is not allowed. So in order to allow our longer fatty acids to enter or penetrate the inner membrane, we have to first convert acyl CoA to acyl carnitine. That is, to first get rid of CoA in the intermembrane space and replace it with a peptide called carnitine. Or some of you may actually remember this in its complete name with its isomerism as L-carnitine. And this L-carnitine, we could imagine, is some kind of um, probably guide, okay, wherein you arrive at the venue, you're lost, you don't know where to go. This is the guy that will tell you where to go and will also help you enter to places you normally cannot. And that means that carnitine will be able to carry this acyl group through the inner membrane and then into the matrix. And then once we already have our acyl group inside, carnitine has already done its part. Now, carnitine will just leave and allow a CoA inside the matrix to take its place. So now we are already back to where we were a while ago, which is acyl CoA. So again, remember that this arrow involving L-carnitine is applicable for the longer fatty acids, which is actually majority of the fatty acids we use for energy utilization. That's why L-carnitine is quite a popular molecule. Now, with that said, we're already done with that transfer part or that journey part. We have successfully entered the matrix. From this arrow onward, we will now proceed with the actual breakdown. And this is often called fatty acid oxidation or otherwise known as beta oxidation. So, in the first step of beta oxidation, we have, oh, of course, oxidation. What else? Wherein, of course, we oxidize an acyl-CoA into an enoyl-CoA. So, enoyl, that means I have an alkene group. So, I'll just draw that double bond so we can track where things are going. And do note that if if we're gonna make it accurate, maybe I could just write this thing right here and this CoA right here, and then the R group right here. If we remember, this C double bond O is the original COOH of the fatty acid. That means that the two carbons holding the double bond of the enoyl are the alpha and beta carbons. This is important because this will guide us to the reason behind this name later on, which is not really that far. Okay, and remember, since we did an oxidation process, there must be an corresponding reduction step. Thus, you could see here that FAD is reduced to FADH. And we know that is important because, as we discussed in the electron transfer chain, FADH could be equivalent to 1.5 ATP once it undergoes oxyphos. Next, from enyl-CoA, it will be hydrated, so meaning the addition of water. And organic chemistry reminds us, if we have a double bond right here, hydrating it will give us an alcohol, wherein the double bond will be gone, and then in its place will be uh, an OH group. I'm not anymore drawing all the hydrogens because in the first place I didn't even complete the hydrogens here. So the point here is that if you focus on the beta carbon after hydration, let's just keep track of the fact that there's an OH group or a hydroxy group right here. Thus, the product so far is a beta hydroxy acyl CoA. Next, there's a second oxidation step wherein, of course, if you remember, oxidizing a single bond OH would give us a carbonyl group, right? And then everything else remains unchanged. So what did we really do? What we did is we, guess what? Oxidized the carbon at the beta position, which actually gives justice to the name beta oxidation. And since we have a keto or a carbonyl group at the beta carbon, so far the name of this thing is a beta ketoacyl CoA. This is really not accurate, so I do hope I don't get criticized that much. Like, if we really want to even make it more accurate, there's supposed to be a sulfur atom here, but again, that's not the point. I just want you to focus here on the beta carbon. And then in the next step, there's cleavage, meaning there's a splitting here of carbons, wherein we could just imagine that there will be a split here. And then you could just imagine that this right here would be split as a molecule of acetyl-CoA, because if you remember, if I have two carbons with a carbonyl group, this is called an acetyl group. With CoA, of course, that's acetyl-CoA. And that means that since we split or remove two carbons from the original ketoacyl-CoA, what we will now be left with is um, an acyl CoA, which is actually the original thing right here. But since we remove two carbons as acetyl CoA, we do have to keep track of the math that arriving at this point will give us two carbons less than the original. It's as if, probably if we start, just for an example, if we start with 14 carbons right here, after going through this, and this, you will have the same acyl CoA, but this time only 12 carbons. And it could repeat by the next cycle, which would repeat these four steps again, and then from those 12 carbons, we will arrive at 10. And then it will arrive at 8, and then basically it's just minus 2, minus 2, minus 2, minus 2, until you can subtract no more. Thus, what you can see here is that this is pretty much the reverse of the pattern we're seeing in fatty acid synthesis, if you watched it already. In fatty acid synthesis, I did mention that the pattern is plus 2, plus 2, plus 2, plus 2, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and then normally we end at 16. But here, it's the reverse. It's just 16, 14, 12, 10, and so on until you can subtract no more. And every time that you execute a cycle, so we call these four steps here as one cycle, you remove a molecule of acetyl-CoA. So if 14 becomes 12, that means you expel another molecule, If 12 becomes 10, you expel another molecule, and this keeps repeating until you can subtract no more. And remember that acetyl-CoA, if ever we need to use it for energy, could enter the Krebs cycle. Of course, the ultimate fate of the carbons from acetyl group will be carbon dioxide, but more importantly, we could produce a lot of ATP from it. Just as a review, in every acetyl-CoA molecule, you could extract as much as 10 molecules of ATP. The computations are as follows, and we're done discussing it. Okay? And not only that, do not forget that a while ago, we did generate a FADH from the first oxidation step. But also do not forget that since we have a second oxidation step, we also do produce one molecule of FADH. That means that in every cycle, that is, these four steps, we produce one NADH and one FADH. Thus, every time you run that cycle, you produce for ATP. Thus, we can clearly see here that our fatty acids are rich sources of energy because for every cycle you get ATP, and for every acetyl-CoA that we remove, we also get a lot of ATP. Therefore, it is customary, I think, in many undergraduate courses that students are asked to compute the ATP produced for a fatty acid just for practice. And thus, I'm going to teach that also to you. For example, you may be asked a question. Compute the total ATP yield from the complete oxidation of an 8-carbon fatty acid. Remember that thing is called caprylic acid, right? And so how can we imagine this? Just imagine this spiral right here, wherein the spiral is just getting smaller and smaller and smaller. That's why sometimes they describe fatty acid oxidation as a spiral pathway, because it may look like a cycle at first, but since that cycle is just getting smaller and smaller and smaller, the more accurate way to describe it is as a spiral. And so in that spiral, if I start from 8 carbons in this example, after one cycle it will spiral down to 6. After another cycle it will spiral down to 4. Now, once you arrive at 4 carbons, this is a critical part, because if you think about it, if I subtract 2 carbons from 4, what is the difference? 2 also, right? And of course, we know that every minus 2 that we do is gonna be counted as acetyl-CoA. However, since if I have 4 and then I subtract 2, my difference is also 2 carbons. Wouldn't that also mean that the last 2 carbons here, which after this we can subtract no more, right, is another molecule of acetyl? Thus, this tells us that in the last cycle, every single time, we produce not just one, but 2 molecules of acetyl-CoA. And now, how are the computations done? It's simple. What we learned was that every time you go through a cycle, you produce ATP, 4 of them. So that means there's a times 4 multiplier for those cycles. How many cycles did we have? 1, 2, 3. So that's 3 cycles. So just accounting from the cycles alone, we have 3 times 4, that's 12 ATP. Also, since acetyl-CoA molecules can enter the Krebs cycle, and we know that every acetyl group is 10 ATP in terms of computation, we just need to multiply this times 10 to how many acetyl groups we made. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 acetyl groups. That's 4 times 10, 40. Remember, at the start of our discussion, I did mention that we have that minus 2 from the conversion of ATP to AMP, so you also need to subtract 2. Many people actually forget this, so be careful. So 12 plus 40 minus 2 is 50. So this is the answer. Now, of course, you might say, oh, 8 carbons, that's a very short example. What if, for example, we make it a little longer and start with 10 carbons? Sure, let's do that. Let's compute. All that's added if I start with 10 carbons is that we will have one cycle more, right? And then, of course, 10 minus 2 becomes 8. Those 2 carbons become another acetyl group. Thus, all we need to do is to just add one cycle and one acetyl. So let's say you want to start with 10 carbons. What are the computations? So first, We have to first count how many cycles there are. How many are there? One, two, three, four. So that's 4 cycles. We know that the multiplier for each cycle is 4, so 4 times 4 is 16. How many acetyls did we make so far? One, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's 5 acetyls, and we know the multiplier for each acetyl is 10 from here, right? So that is 50. And then that minus 2 never changes, that's constant. So add everything. 50 plus 16, that's 66 minus 2 is 64. And so far, hopefully you get the point. But if you want a shortcut, I can give you a shortcut. Now, let's first realize some patterns. First, when we started with 8 carbons, that is caprylic acid, how many acetyl groups did we make? We made 4, right? When we started with 10 carbons a while ago, how many acetyls did we have? 5. Do you see a pattern? 8 carbons, 4 acetyls, 10 carbons, 5 acetyls. There should be a pattern, right? It's as if the number of acetyls is always half of the number of carbons. The half of 8 is 4, the half of 10 is 5. So in order to make a shortcut, just use this formula. The number of acetyls is the number of carbons divided by 2. So as long as you know how many carbons are in caprylic acid, that's 8, then you know that you have 4 acetyls. Or for example, if you have, I don't know, palmitic acid, since palmitic acid has 16 carbons, we know that when it's completely broken down, that will give us 8 acetyl groups, and so on and so forth. You will also notice that when we had 4 acetyls, we have 3 cycles. When we had 5 acetyls, we have 4 cycles. Might as well say that the moment we have 6 acetyls, we will have 5 cycles. So what's the pattern here? Obviously, the pattern is that the acetyls are always one more than the cycle, right? Or in inverse, you could just say that all the time, the cycles are just one less than the acetyls. So, a shortcut for the computation of the cycles is the number of acetyls minus 1. So, for example, you might think, palmitic, oh my god, that's a long molecule. Can I possibly compute it in a very short time, the ATP yield? Yes. So first, we already know it has 8 acetyl groups times 10, that's 80. And then we know that the cycles is always one less. So the cycles is 8 minus 1, so that's 7. And we know the multiplier for cycles is always 4, so that's 7 times 4 is 28. And then minus 2, don't ever forget. 80 plus 28 minus 2 is 106. So hopefully by showing you these shortcuts, it will accelerate your speed in computing ATP in exam questions that you may be asked for things like these. Now, one last thing is that you should know that all of the things in the chaos we've been discussing so far will only activate when we are in the fasted state, because that is when we have energy deficit. That is, we are starving, our blood sugar levels are low, and our body is desperately trying to find sources of energy. Otherwise, we will die. We know that. And um, actually, I've kind of leaked my next video, but um, as I will discuss more in the next discussion or in the next recording, glucagon is gonna stimulate fatty acid breakdown. That is why, since we know this concept that when we fast ourselves or when we starve ourselves, our body starts burning our fats. Many people utilize that in their diet. That's why it's becoming a fad that, the concept is you want to burn your fats, you want to lose your flabs, diet a lot. Don't eat food for long periods of time. Although of course, many people are not gonna survive doing that for long. But theoretically speaking, that does work.